Hello, Erin from the Morehouse Flock today, giving you the knitting tip on how to put beads on your knitting using a dental floss threader. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure everyone has 3 key tips about knitting with beads that have helped me tremendously. The first one is grab yourself a small bowl of some kind. This is a mini tagine that a friend gave me from Morocco. Really excited about it because it's so pretty, but it's also very useful because it holds the beads for me rather than having to fight with the container the beads come in, because they might come in a tube, they might come in a bag, they might come in what looks like a Tic Tac container. If you have to open that every time you need a bead, that's gonna be frustrating. So put them in this container ahead of time, then you can just grab them easily as you need them. The other thing that I found really handy was to make sure that I was sitting at a table when I started this, because if you were to pick up some of these beads and drop them, you never know where they're going to end up. And if they're the same color as your floor, it's going to be hard to find them right away. And third, I found that counting out the number of beads I needed for each row or round and putting that in the bowl was super helpful as a mile marker for me. So on Christine's cowl, which was designed by Melody Moore, and I decided to embellish it by adding beads here, I need 20 beads per round for the way that I did this. So if I count out the beads ahead of time, then I have a way to gauge how much farther I have to go. And that was just helpful for me, so I thought I would pass that along. So how do we get started? With this dental floss threader, which is used to help you get dental flosses under your braces, there is a thick, almost stiff shaft, and then there's a flexible loop at the bottom. So what we're going to do, take a pair of scissors and just cut this loop as close to that shaft as we can. And that gives us what looks like a fish hook. So we're gonna take this fish hook and we're gonna put it on our knitting. And here's my cowl getting started. My next stitch is the one I want to bead, and I'm going to thread this threader through the stitch. And then I'm gonna take the 2 ends, put them together, and I'm gonna slide a bead onto that. And you can do this in any order that you want, whatever's comfortable, whatever you experiment with, whatever you practice with. But the idea is the threader is through the stitch. You then can pull the stitch off your needles, slide the bead all the way down onto the stitch, and then put the stitch back on the needle. And you can see the threader wants to come out all by itself. That's super handy because you don't really need it once you've got the bead on the stitch. That seats it really well, and you can see this technique puts the bead all around the stitch so it'll stay vertical when you then go knit it. So here we go. Knit one, and then the bead sits right there. Let's try one more. So I'm going to take the bead, I am going to put my floss threader through my stitch, and then I'm going to thread it on. This is a little different order this time. Before I put both ends together, now I've put the bead on and I'm going to thread the other end in. That may be easier for you, so experiment with which order is better for you. And it's going to take practice. Notice that I'm dropping it, things are slippery. 1, because they're tiny, and 2, they're not meant to be fast, right? They're meant to embellish, which means it's just gonna take a little bit of time. So give yourself plenty of time and plenty of breathing room. And see, I just slid that down onto that stitch, and now put it back on the needle, pull out the threader, and then I'll knit my stitch. So grab my working yarn wherever that disappeared to, wrap this yarn around the needle for the stitch, and there I go. 2 stitches now that have beads sitting on them. Happy knitting from Morehouse Farm.